Be here now. Just be here now.
Welcome to the New Growth Podcast with Nikki Walton. Join her as she explores divine love as a key to spiritual growth, empowered service, and inner and outer success. If you'd like to support Nikki's podcast, please visit BeHereNowNetwork.com/Nikki.
Welcome back to New Growth. After you get done listening to this episode, I would love for you to check out my other podcast, Good Mornings with Curly Nikki, also known as God Mornings with Curly Nikki, available on Apple Podcasts. Please listen, subscribe, leave a review, and you can start waking up with me, waking up as love every single day of the week. Monday through Friday, I drop a new episode, and each one consists of a different spiritual practice, what I like to call easy access doors into this truth, into this oneness. And so we're just practicing love every morning until, we recognize that we never had to practice it, that we are it. So check it out. Join me every morning, every good morning, every God morning. Good Mornings with Curly Nikki. I'll see you there. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of New Growth. I'm your host, Nikki Walton, and today with me is Sharon Salzberg. She's a best-selling author and New York Times best-selling author. She's like the queen, the queen of meditation, the queen of meditation, Metta, Lovingkindness. Sharon, thank you. I'm so honored to finally be able to chat with you. I feel like I've been running after you forever. This is beautiful and feels like I've come full circle.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And I am sometimes, like now, kind of overwhelmed. So I do take some pursuing, but I'm so grateful you did that.
Man, yeah, I'm very persistent, especially when I'm like itching to have a conversation. And there's so much I came upon your writings with the word happiness, like when I was seeking happiness, like what is happiness? But before we get into like real happiness, I would love to know what your experience is of the present moment, like this now. How do you experience it?
It's kind of interesting because I spent most of the kind of pandemic duration up in Barre, Mass, where I have a home and a retreat center, the Insight Meditation Society, which closed down. And I also have an apartment in New York City, which is where I'm speaking to you from today. And it was March 2020. I had just gotten back to New York from being in California the whole month of February. And I was teaching, and actually, first I did a weekend with Krishnadas at Kripalu Yoga Center, and
amazing.
Looking back, it was like 200 people in a completely airless room, like no windows, singing. Somehow we all survived. Right. I think we did. And then I got to New York, and I just started feeling like there's so much anxiety, and everyone's so freaked out, and I'm starting to freak out. And I thought, I'll just go up to Barre for 2 weeks. I came up there in March 2020 with my snow boots, thinking it was going to be for 2 weeks, and it was over a year.
Goodness gracious!
So, and that was very, we made a big push to somehow get the retreat center online and be able to serve people, and I felt like very connected to people, and it was just this extraordinary time. It's like the outpouring of grief and loss and fear.
Absolutely.
And myself, I had a book that came out, my most recent book called Real Change. It came out in September of 2020, and it was supposed to come out in June, and they postponed it. And with the postponement, I had the chance to write a new preface. And so the overwhelming question for me that I kept asking myself was, what's still true? Like in all this disruption and craziness and fear and sorrow, what's still true? Like what's holding you up, and that pointed me right back to my meditation experience, which I started practice in January of 1971 in Bodh Gaya, India, so it's been a long time with a lot of people, actually.
Yes.
And, so then the book came out and I lived my life in Barrie and I was online constantly trying to serve people. And then there was, as you know, this sort of moment of relief, it's like things were opening. I came back to New York and now it's all kind of scary again. It's like very interesting. I thought, and I see that from my friends here, like, I don't know quite how to navigate it all. I lived a very quiet, solitary life, except for being constantly online. But, I'm not used to like, do I go in there? And like, what about the mask? Like,
Exactly.
So I'm sort of, and I just feel for people so much, it's like people are so tired. And
what's your number one recommendation then for this fear? Like when it hit last year, and you said too that you were a little scared. I know I was. And I actually went within myself for a while. I stopped offering everything for like 2 or 3 months because I knew I needed to settle first. But what would be your recommendation for people with fear around the pandemic, but just fear in general? Because that's a very strong and heavy emotion that we all deal with.
Well, it's two things, actually. One is, and in a way they're kind of connected. When I've sat in meditation and looked at my own fear, which I've had plenty of time to do through my life, what I've seen is a very personal kind of insight, but I think it's not just me, that despite the world's pronouncement that we're afraid of the unknown, which of course is true, I get really afraid when I think I do know and it's going to be really bad. And it's all the stories that I tell myself. Oh,
that's good. That is so good. That is true. Yes.
Even in the midst of that cascade, if I remind myself, you know what? You don't know. I feel space. I feel relief. So that's been a very important insight for me. And then the other thing is just the story, which I've only recently started telling again about. And I think it's not just for fear. I think it's that sense of incredible exhaustion people have too. I was teaching once in Barrie at the Insight Meditation Society, and the person I was teaching with was giving the evening talk. So I was just sitting there and listening. And she's someone who had begun her meditation practice at that center, I don't know, 20 years before, something like that. And she started telling a story about her first retreat. And she said, I was so overcome with restlessness that I went in to see Sharon, who was one of the teachers. And I said to her, has anyone ever died of restlessness? And she said, and of course, like I had no memory whatsoever. I thought, what did I say? And she said, not from just one moment at a time of it. And I thought that is a really good answer.
That is an amazing answer. Powerful answer.
That's been coming up in my mind so much these days because, of course, the natural human tendency is to think another 6 months or let's try to experience the whole next year right now.
Right.
And just it's just this moment. This is what I have to deal with right now.
Wow. Those are two very, very powerful quotes. I feel like I need to write them down, but we are recording, thank God. I will write them down later. It's like I feel that I'm looking for a pen, but it's good. You are amazing. I love what you said about fear, because that's me. It's not the unknown. It's I've decided that I know what's coming and it is horrible and
That's right.
I'm going to freak myself out. But like you, I've been watching that. Especially lately, whenever a fear comes up about anything, I look at it and I'm like, is that true? Kind of like Byron Katie too. Like, is this true? Can I know for sure if this is true? No. And then I just kind of let it go. And I have another permission slip I use, which is, since it hurts, it's not true. It's like God saying, hey, I don't agree with you. So just let that go and return to the present moment. And, it just helps me feel better in that moment. And I can focus again on something more productive. But I would love to know about your definition of real happiness. Like, what is true happiness?
Oh, that is really funny because that book, which was maybe 11 years ago, came out.
Powerful book.
Thank you. Originally was called, and for quite a bit of its process in publication, was called Why Meditate? Because that's what it was about. And then I got an advanced copy of my friend Matthew Ricard's forthcoming book, which was called Why Meditate? And his was coming out in September, and mine was coming out the following January or something. So we had to scramble for another title. And the publisher came up with Real Happiness. And
that's an excellent one.
Yeah, I think it is really good. But I was also a little ambivalent about it because I thought, I'm going to get into trouble with this. And I did. I went on tour with the book, and people often have a sense of happiness as something very superficial.
Of course, they've defined
pleasure
it
and
yeah.
We're already seeking that constantly anyway. Like, and what do you mean real? Are you saying the happiness I have isn't real? So it was a little bit, a challenge along the way. But I think it is so fundamentally what we want. It's just sort of the same question all those years later. Exactly. I asked myself when I would say, what's holding you up? What are you counting on? What's still true? If all the things we normally rely on day to day are not happening, what's there? And I think there is a quality of happiness we can access through presence, through connection, not through things or even experiences, as we've learned, off of this last year. But in a deeper place in our being, I think it really is available to us. Thank goodness,
Yes. Yeah. Like an innate happiness that we can always turn to. What started you on your path to seeking that innate, like real happiness? Like, where were you in time and space when you began this journey?
In time and space, I guess I was in Buffalo, New York. I was a college student. And I took an Asian philosophy course in my sophomore year. Honestly, as I often say, as far as I can remember, out of kind of happenstance, there was a philosophy requirement. I had to do some philosophy course. And I looked at the schedule and I thought, it's on Tuesday. That's convenient. Let me do that one.
Exactly.
And I'll do that one. And the course totally changed my life. It was, first of all, in talking about Buddhism or the Buddhist teaching and the very famous refrain of the Buddhas where he said suffering is a part of life. It's just there, and it's inevitable. That translated in my mind, I having had a very, like many people do, a very traumatic, difficult childhood, that translated in my mind to, you're not so weird. It's not just you. You're not so different. This is a part of life in different degrees, obviously, in different elements, of life. But this is something we actually do share. And so I think it was maybe the first time in my life I felt I really belonged in a bigger picture. And then I heard in the context of the class that there were practices, there were methods, there were techniques you could use. And they were called meditation. And if you did them, you could be a lot happier. And I was going to college in Buffalo, and I looked around Buffalo. I didn't see it anywhere. This is 1970. So the university had an independent study program. And if you created a project that they liked, you could go anywhere in the world theoretically for a year. So I said, I want to go to India and learn how to meditate. And they said, okay. So off I went.
Charmed life.
Yeah. I mean, it was, especially that, I look at that so often, and because I was really frightened. I mean, that's sort of my mode. I was 18 years old. I'd skipped 2 grades in public school.
Wow.
And I'd never even been to California before. I grew up in New York City, went to college in Buffalo, and suddenly I'm going to India. And I think, how did I do that?
Wow, that's beautiful. I love that. Love that. And so when you got to India, what was it like? Who did you work with, or who were the teachers?
Well, I was very kind of pragmatically oriented. I really wanted to know the how-to, like I wanted a method, I wanted a process. And
Yeah.
I couldn't quite find it for a while. I wandered around. I was with a small group of friends. We wandered around. I started out first of all, we didn't just arrive in India. We went overland, as many people did. So that was a process. And then in India, started out in Dharamsala because I knew the Dalai Lama was there. And I'd heard he was a Buddhist. I thought, maybe I'll learn how to meditate there. And there were incredible teachers and opportunities, but nothing quite worked. It was very much like, you show up for the meditation class and they'd say, the translator had to go to the dentist at the other end of India. He'll be back in a few weeks, and then it was just and then I overheard in a Tibetan restaurant, this was, months later, I overheard that there was going to be an international yoga conference in New Delhi, Hatha Yoga Conference. And I thought, maybe I'll go there and I'll find my teacher there. So we went there, and that was a completely dismal, terrible experience where the low point was when these yogis and swamis were pushing and shoving against each other to be the first to grab the mic and speak. And then I don't even know how, all these years later, I still haven't asked him how it happened, but Dan Goleman was actually speaking at that conference.
Wow.
At the time, he was a graduate student in psychology, studying meditation. And for some reason, he was invited and accepted giving a talk at this conference. So I went to his talk, and he mentioned that he was going to go to this town called Bodh Gaya and do this intensive 10-day meditation retreat, that Ram Dass was going to be there as a student. And I'd heard him lecture, in Buffalo. And
so you had already heard Ram Dass.
I'd heard him speak in Buffalo, and
fabulous.
Had, I think, the Psychedelic Experience, one of those early books, And
yes.
So I knew who he was. And the way Dan described the retreat, it was very much like, it's very practical. It's very direct. It's just what I was interested in. So I thought, maybe that's it. And it was it. So I followed him with a number of other people who heard him speak to Bodh Gaya and began my first retreat. And it was at my first retreat that I met Krishna Das, Ram Dass, a lot of Dasses. They weren't Dasses. Ram Dass was Ram Dass, but Krishna Das was Jeffrey. And this is before they'd gone off and found Maharaji. And
that was an
nearby,
epic meeting.
Who was Linda?
That's an epic meeting of souls. Like, that's beautiful. That's amazing.
Yeah, we've been friends for a very long time.
Wow. Did you go with them to meet Maharaji?
No, that's a famous story too.
I want to hear that too. Well, first finish the story about the 10-day intensive, because I've never done a Buddhist, intensive meditation retreat, only silent retreats.
Yeah. So it was a very, it was a beautiful retreat, challenging. I mean, I'd never even looked within myself before, really, and it began with concentration on the breath, and then moved to what these days we call a body scan, moving your attention through your body. It ended with a little bit of loving-kindness meditation. And then Goenka, who was the teacher, S.N. Goenka, he had just come from Burma to India. And he taught a series of 10-day retreats there. And we all stayed, through many retreats. And then Ram Dass and this group of people decided to hire this bus and go off and look for Maharaji. So sometimes when I'm teaching with Krishna Das, we each tell the story from our own angle. Yes, my angle is waving goodbye to the bus and seeing them all go off. And once he said to me, "Why didn't you get on the bus?"
Yeah.
And I said, "You didn't even know where he was." I just found practice, and I was found myself, it was just this incredible time. And you didn't even know where the man was. Why should I get on the bus? So I said, "How long did it take you to find him?" And he said, 10 hours or something, or 2 hours, or, I thought it was going to be months of being on a bus.
Right.
So it's very funny from each angle.
Wow. Did you ever meet him? Did you go back to India?
I
guess
did
that was
go back to
72.
India. I never met him. And I sort of followed a very assiduously Buddhist path through my Burmese teachers, Tibetan teachers, and then I had to go back to Buffalo and finish school, and then I went back to India. So I'm not even quite sure of the years, but I think it was still maybe my first trip.
Okay.
When somebody brought me to his ashram. He had already died, Maharaji.
Mm-hmm.
But we went to the Brindavan ashram, and
Nice.
it was there when he was already not in the body that I felt a very strong connection with him.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. That made me think when you said earlier, loving kindness and that meditation, it makes me think of Ram Dass's mantra, I am loving awareness. Is that metta or is that something else? Like, is it?
I think that's a combo, actually. I think he took metta and mindfulness and forged them together. Because metta or loving kindness in many ways is at the heart of mindfulness, to be able to see all our emotions and all our thought patterns and all our stuff, and in the light of that kind of loving acceptance is not easy. And it's what mindfulness really is, so right. There's like kind of the hidden heart of it is loving kindness. And sometimes these days people are struggling because the word mindfulness sounds so cold and clinical. And
right.
So they say, well, call it warm mindfulness or call it kindfulness or call it loving awareness.
Kindfulness. I hadn't heard that one.
Yeah.
I've heard heartfulness. Is that the same thing or is that something else?
Yeah.
So many names for the same, destination, right? The same practice. For you, is metta, does it feel like you're loving the anger when it comes? Like, are you aware of the anger and then simultaneously becoming aware of love too?
I think that's the metta aspect of mindfulness, just in terms of technique. Metta would be kind of loving yourself, even if you're angry, And of course, then we have to really understand what love is, especially if you're thinking about loving someone else, even though they're angry.
Yes. What's your definition of love?
A profound sense of connection. I think if you're talking about love for another, it doesn't necessarily mean you like them or you approve of them or you're not going to fight their actions but it's this deep, deep knowing that our lives are intertwined, that there's an us there, and with oneself too, that underneath our personalities and our fears and all of our conditioning, there's the possibility of like strength and clarity and connection that we can really reach. We can access that.
That's beautiful. So taking it to your word, like the practical application, let's say you are face to face with someone that's challenging to love. What do you do?
The most important kind of, for me, like model I return to is remembering that metta is a heart space, that it doesn't demand a certain action. It doesn't mean I have to say yes. It doesn't mean I have to stay in their presence. It doesn't mean I have to pretend, everything is okay.
Right, exactly.
It almost comes back sometimes in my mind to one of Maharaji's most famous sayings was, never throw anyone out of your heart. Never throw anyone out of your heart.
I love that.
And one of my colleagues, my friend Sylvia Borstein, had a kind of addendum to that. She said, never throw anyone out of your heart. You might throw them out of your life, but never throw them out of your heart.
Amen. That's an excellent addendum.
A
necessary addendum.
I often remind myself of that, that I have to let wisdom or discernment or intuition or other elements inform my decision about what to say or what to do or pulling back or whatever it might be. But my heart space
Exactly.
can always be one of connection. And I think, I meet a lot of people who are afraid of the idea of loving kindness because they think it means you have to say yes. You have to be sweet, you have
right,
to
you get
smile,
walked all over. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, it's not necessarily like you said, it's not changing your actions necessarily. It's like a feeling habit, staying in that natural state of loving awareness, and then being able to use your discernment to know, okay, now it is time to go.
That's right.
And I take this self somewhere else with this love.
Exactly.
Oh, that's cool. I love it. So tell me what your daily practice looks like, your meditation practice, and how it's changed over your journey.
Well, it's changed, over and over again. In 1985, I went to Burma for 3 months. Actually, Ramdas was there too as a student. And
wow.
This is when he left because his stepmother got really ill and he had to leave pretty quickly. I remember him knocking on my door and he gave me his whole stash of like M&Ms and things, he had brought.
I love it.
Get him through.
Yeah.
Burma's very austere. And I did an intensive period of loving kindness for 3 months because it is its own method, even though they all blend and support each other, it is its own technique as well. And so it was the first time I'd gotten a chance to really go deep in that technique. And it was so impactful for me that I came back and started teaching it right away. And for a long time, I think 4 years, loving kindness was my only practice. It's what I did all the time. And then I had a Burmese teacher, and he kind of said, well, it's time to go back to mindfulness, and which I did. And then I do sit every day, and in my daily sitting, it really became kind of, you could say, loving awareness, but not loving kindness as a practice also involves phrases like holding people in your heart and thinking, may you be safe, may you be happy, so.
I like the way Krishnadas ends his
exactly.
singing.
That's where he got it from.
As soon as he does it, I think of you every single time. I'm like, oh, that's Sharon coming through KD at the end of every Thursday night.
That's where he got it from. And so, my formal practice would not be the phrases when I sat every day, but I had a resolve to use loving kindness whenever I was waiting. And I counted every mode of transportation as waiting. So walking down the streets of New York or sitting on an airplane or sitting in the subway, whatever it was, I would silently be looking at people thinking, may you be happy, may you be safe, things like that. And then, interestingly enough, in this last year, when I was alone so much and not traveling at all, and I went back to much more formal loving kindness. And as well, usually we divide meditation into two aspects. One is like a formal practice. You're sitting or you're walking. It's very purposeful. And the other is what one Tibetan teacher once called short moments many times. It's like you take a breath before you answer the phone, or you look at somebody and you think, may you be happy, may you be peaceful before you start the meeting, just like little moments.
Yes, I love
throughout
that.
there. And so those became more kind of also more possible in my changed schedule, and more fun. And so my overall resolve for the past year is to be kinder in very real ways. And so that has notably involved not sending emails, not pressing send on the email once I've written it, for reading it again.
Powerful practice.
And then
I've been doing that too.
If I got that email, I might misunderstand it and think it was this other thing. And that was said kind of tersely, maybe.
Yes, exactly. Taking the time to go back and put a greeting instead of just like immediately going into the ask. I have to do that too sometimes.
Just that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, it's a powerful pause. Okay. Reread. Like you said, before you hit that send. That's key. That's so key. And then it changes their day. It changes their day too. I feel like even though I've never formally practiced metta, it's my life. I feel like my version is like the Christian mystics, Brother Lawrence, practicing the presence of God, of love. Every step, every breath, everything I do, I'm reaching for that. I'm turning toward that. I'm always, it's there, you know, and it's been a practice here for at least like 6 years now, like my main practice, even though I sit formally and I do a lot of japa as well, newly again, like in the last year, I'm doing the japa in that love. You know, I'm watching the japa happen in that love, and it helps. And it keeps that restlessness at bay too. Whenever I'm noticing I'm restless, like we talked about earlier, I immediately recognize I'm not restless. I just forgot love. And then I feel for that love again. And then the restlessness might still be there, but it peters out.
That's beautiful. So how did you find the Be Here Now Network? I'm curious.
Oh, yes. So I had just gotten back from Spain. I had went to Madrid and had fun with friends and my sister and her husband. And they actually surprised me and took me to Avila. Is that how you pronounce it? St. Teresa's home?
Avila must be.
Yes. Everything about her, like for a whole day. And I got lost in the city actually. And my sister was like, if we don't find her, Nikki's going to get a habit and stay at the convent. Like I was. So they found me, they brought me back home. And when I got home, I could feel deeply that I needed to finally start doing more in this space because it's all I cared about, spiritual space. It's all I care about. It's all I talk about. I mean, even with random strangers at a restaurant or at a bar or on the airplane, this is what the conversation turns into every time, no matter who it is. And I reached out and I just wanted to know if, I reached out to Raghu and I'm like, are you all doing any virtual retreats? Anything coming up? And he said, we don't do too many, but, podcast. You'd be interested in that? And I'm like, I don't even listen to podcasts. I don't know anything about podcasting. But sure, I'll try, I'll do my best. And so I just started kind of brainstorming on what that would look like. And I had some friends like in the entertainment industry that I knew were into spirituality, like Tracy Ellis Ross and her sister, Rhonda Ross. They were my first interview. And then I just started reaching out to my teachers, people like you, so I could have these candid conversations where I get to hear what your journey has been like and share a bit more about mine. And yeah, it's once a month. And that was what I could commit to at the time. And it felt so good. And also nothing ever happens by mistake because Raghu sent a mala, a little one, like 27 beads and the guru bead. And it had one of Maharashi's like strings from the blanket.
Oh, nice.
And so I immediately was like, I haven't chanted like Sanskrit words in years. I'm like, let me get started again. So of course, like I bought a couple more Ram Dass books because I hadn't had like a revisit since like 2013. When I first found Ram Dass, it was 2013. So now it's 2020, I'm kind of cracking those books back open, getting new ones, like, cause I'd given books away. And I found myself chanting and singing Krishna Das music all day long. I still that's my background. Like that's my whole life is just listening to beautiful, uplifting music like that. And I email him a lot. And I started chanting formally the Maha Mantra, November 28th, 2020, every day, 16 rounds in the morning and 4 at night. Now I do 16 in the morning and 16 at night. Wow. And I believe that my new podcast, Good Mornings with Curly Nikki, came out of that practice. So I started that in November. And then by like January, February of 2021, because I was waking up at 5 a.m. to get the 16 rounds in before my life began, I was like, I feel so inspired and so good. It felt like I needed to be doing more than just typing on Instagram every day, long captions that I'm sure only 10 people were reading. So like maybe there's some other offering. And that idea to share just short form podcast episodes every single day started to take shape. And yeah, so now I wake up at like 4:15, 4:30 every morning.
You are awesome.
It is hard. It is not easy. I'm tired now. I feel like I'm always tired, but that love is there and it's pushing, even though this body is tired, and I don't eat right. I try to do my best with that. I don't eat enough because I'm always so busy. But this love, I feel like if it wasn't for the focus on that, the practice of that, the blessing of the remembrance of that and the anchor of that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I wouldn't be living where I'm living now. I wouldn't know the people. I wouldn't be talking to you. I wouldn't have been to Ram Dass's house, last month. All of this has become, it's like that love took form as all of this.
That's so great. Or as somebody like Raghu would say, Maharaji took you under his blanket.
Yes, exactly. Exactly that. Exactly that. I love him. I love the whole team. And I've always watched you from afar and love what you do. I love you and KD together. You and Krishnadas are a great teaching team, so full of love. You. So cool. How has that relationship blossomed over the years? When did you all start formally working together?
It would be interesting to remember, which I wish I could. It was many years later, because of course he wasn't singing. I mean, I used to go see him sing in these tiny little rooms and, different places. And
that's right, because y'all are all from New York. That's cool.
Yeah. And I don't know, it just came up, but now, of course, the years go by. I could say it wasn't that long ago. It was 20 years ago, 25 years ago.
It goes by so fast, too. Ago. I had no idea how fast time moved. This is really strange, all of it. Yeah. So I can't really even, you sing kirtan. I think of you being so Buddhist, so clean Buddhist. What's your favorite, chant?
Well, I would probably say the Chalisa,
yeah. I've learned it. That was another thing I did last year. I did a lot during the pandemic, and one of them was learning the Chalisa, and I learned to Bernie's Chalisa. That version, that hymn. Yeah. And there's also a beautiful woman named Savani Mata. And I just found her a few months ago, and I'm going to send you the link, and I'll put it in the show notes too. I'm going to send you the link of her version. And it's if you're a fan of Francis and the Machine, is that group, that woman with the gorgeous voice? It sounds like the Chalisa from her. If Francis did the Chalisa, it is really a really beautiful version. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please do. I've known people through the years tell me I could only listen to Krishnadas when I was going through chemo, or when I was having this, ordeal, or when I was opening up, this amazing opportunity, or, he's really meant so much to so many people. And I feel, honored that I've been, watching it develop.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I'm sure he feels the exact same way about you. So thank you to both of you. It's been cool. I got to speak with him before. I did an interview with him a few months back, and now I'm talking to you. So thank you.
That's great.
Can you tell my audience how to keep up with you and all of your offerings?
Well, my website is just SharonSalzberg.com, and I'm writing another book. But
of course you are. Of course. That is a large part of who you are for us, and your service to just help us all experience that real happiness. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me so beautifully of the innate power of love, how it's always there.
It's always here. Only love is here. And that's my little mantra, only love. And thank you all, as always, for tuning in. I love you, and we'll chat soon.